out, but I think everyone in the team really stepped up at another level on the weekend.
Nick, we'll take a break and we'll talk about your form and some other aspects of what happened on the weekend right after this. Stay with us.
Tuesday night, we're talking footy.
On 7 News, we catch up with local hero Leighton Hewitt as he's welcomed home to Adelaide after his stunning US Open victory. Plus, we talk exclusively to Power coach Mark Williams about plans for this weekend's home ground final against Hawthorn.
Series 2 for the driver in you.
In less than 12 months, you could find yourself in a well-paid computer career with training and job placement assistance from Australia's leading IT educator, Spherion. Call 132784.
Things that make you go,
Introducing McDonald's ever-changing new taste menu. Try our new delicious cheese and tomato toasted sandwich with melted cheese and garden fresh tomato on 2 slices of toasted bread.
Or go for our new pikelet dippers. 5 fluffy pikelets served hot and fresh with cinnamon sugar and hot cake syrup.
McDonald's permanent new taste menu.
It's here to stay.
things that make you go,
What'll you choose today?
Enter Twinings Cup to Cup for your chance to win one of 5 trips for 2 to London. Twinings, the tea for every taste.
When the National Trust listed the Vickers Vimy as a Bank SA heritage icon, it was saluting 2 great South Australian aviators, Ross and Keith Smith. And you can see this world record-breaking aircraft at Adelaide Airport.
Is your old roof leaking, creaking, or collapsing? Replace it now before expensive structural damage is done. Use Stratco Renovation Roofing in Colorbond. Stratco Roofing. Phone for an authorised dealer to call.
There's one paper towel that stands tough. New, thick and thirsty is riveted together for extra strength to make them thicker and thirstier than ever before. In fact, there's no job that's too tough for thick and thirsty. Milk, jam, or any of life's little accidents. So when you really need help in the kitchen, remember new Thick and Thirsty. They're a towel of strength.
On Today Tonight, fresh or frozen?
Always buy frozen products because it's a lot easier, time-saving.
Which veggies are the most nutritious?
There were a few surprises.
The results from the lab, 6:30 on 7.
With Natalie Barr. This is 7 News.
Good evening. New York is in the grip of a disaster tonight. 2 planes have crashed into the top of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center and terrorists are believed to be responsible. One of the planes is believed to have been...
play and things like that, and, you know, the main thing was that I could
hijacked
and contribute to the side and...
of an explosion at the Pentagon. We'll cross live now to NBC.
Earlier this morning for an event on literacy. He was going to a school to talk with kids. David, what can you tell us?
A little bit more about how all of this unfolded and what the president is going to do next. The president declared this an apparent terrorist act. He offered a prayer for the families, promised to hunt down, in his words, the people responsible for this. He will now travel back to Washington, and aides are telling us now that he will immediately convene a national security meeting to see what steps are taken next.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion, and right now we're looking at an aerial view of the Pentagon. Mick, can you talk to us?
Officially, nobody knows exactly what happened. I think the picture is pretty clear. According to one U.S. Army officer who went running past me at a full trot, he said that it appears that a bomb was detonated at the heliport. The heliport is a helicopter landing area right next to the Pentagon, just adjacent to the E-ring. The offices nearest the heliport area are U.S. Army, Reserve officers, and the Army Reserve our offices are located there. But as you can see, it appears to be a pretty significant blast. To give you some perspective, we are almost on the opposite side of the building, the world's largest office building. And as I reported to you, we could feel the building shake and the windows rattle. And as I was in the hallway just a few moments ago, I could smell an acrid kind of smoke, the kind of almost what you'd smell when a fluorescent light goes bad, that kind of ballast smell. And authorities are clearing the building. I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside right now, but it appears that in what I think people here in the building are already describing as a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack, not only against the World Trade Center, but against the Pentagon and U.S. military right here in Washington. The Pentagon encountered some of those who survived, whatever it was, whether it was a bomb or an airplane crashing into the Pentagon. One of the survivors who was reportedly injured, had various lacerations, was on the second floor of the D ring. That is one ring inside the outer ring of the Pentagon, when suddenly there was this horrific blast, and he said that the second floor buckled upward, and then the third floor above him actually collapsed downward. The scene on the other side of the building, as it's being described to us, there are people being removed on stretchers. Security forces are evacuating the building right now, and according to the officials here at the Pentagon, they still don't know exactly what it was, but as you reported, Katie, eyewitnesses reported that, in fact, it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
And Mick, any idea, I wasn't quite sure if you said this, about the number of people who might have been hurt or worse in this?
No idea at all, Katie. As you know, having worked here on any given day, this is a small city, 25 to 30,000 people may be working here at any one time. That portion of the Pentagon, by the way, had just been remodeled and just reopened. If the crash had occurred just a few months ago, that section of the Pentagon would have been virtually empty. But at this time of day, early morning or mid-morning, the Pentagon's very busy. It's impossible to say how many casualties there may be. But there have been a large number of people cited being removed on stretchers. And again, as one survivor said, the floor just buckled up under him and the roof caved in on him.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. We want to move a couple of miles away from you right now.
And we will leave NBC's coverage of this disaster in New York for a short time. We are just getting reports in right now that a Palestinian organisation has apparently, reportedly claimed responsibility for these 3 blasts on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in New York. We'll be back with more right after this short break.
Field is turned upside down when a young boy goes missing.
Definite feeling of unease.
Something's not right. What terrible secret is he running away from on the new series of Heartbeat, Thursday, 8:30.
It's September Surprise at Truscott Hi-Fi. Surprisingly extra low prices on some great products. NEC 68cm AV stereo TVs with free cabinet. Sony Hi8 camcorders save $66. RCA DVD players $100 off. Sharp 200-watt 6CD Hi-Fi systems $100 off. And Panasonic 6-head stereo VCRs save $26. Not surprising, it's all from Truscott Hi-Fi. Adelaide's lowest prices with up to 24 months interest-free terms.
A&R has opened a new city store in Grote Street. So we've lifted the lid on prices at all A&R stores, like this computer for just $17.99, with software, internet, scanner and a printer. There's digital cameras, gas lift chairs, Canon printers, CD burners, stereo speakers and more at A&R's grand opening sale, City Store, Port Adelaide and Melrose Park.
Tain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Tain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Tain't what you do, it's the way that you do it.
It's your life. Plan for it. Life Plan Funds Management.
Did you know the average house being built in South Australia today is about 18 squares? That's 185.8 square metres of roof to catch rain. If you multiply that by an average rainfall of 455 mils, that is equal to 83,610 litres of water. So why pay ever-increasing water rates? Catch the winter rains and cut your summer costs. Tank World. Cost-saving, clean water, smart thinking.
Better Product Review with Michelle Downs.
This week, we look at cleaning solutions for around the home. Big Kev Shower Plus cuts through soap scum, kills germs and disinfects your entire bathroom, leaving a fresh citrus fragrance. Simply spray on and rinse off. Big Kev Stain Free has a new, improved formula that removes most stains from a variety of household surfaces. Carpet stains are removed with ease. Big Kev's products available in the cleaning aisle of your local supermarket.
Better Product Review makes your shopping a breeze.
Two murders.
It's called closing ranks.
Returning now to the breaking news we have from the United States tonight. 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in New York and another into the Pentagon. The White House is also being evacuated. This is how the emergency unfolded. As you can see, the pictures on your screen, devastating. The first plane crashed into the World Trade Center shortly before 9 o'clock in the morning. A second plane crashed through just 18 minutes after that. The planes are believed to be American airline Boeing 767s that have been hijacked. One is believed to have been a flight from Boston to Los Angeles. Flames are shooting from the windows of both towers. Smoke is pouring from those top floors, 110 stories up it is. Many people are trapped in the upper floors. There is a tourist platform right at the top. Witnesses are describing a very loud crashing noise. Debris is plunging into the street below. Thousands of people are said to be pouring out into the street, escaping those buildings and others in New York and Washington. It's just after 9 o'clock in the morning New York time. People would have just started arriving for work, so devastating scenes in 2 cities in the United States tonight. And we will now cross back live to NBC.
One can only hope that the area has been evacuated, but of course you wonder about all the emergency vehicles and the people who might have been injured early in the morning.
Well, you remember when the bomb went off in the basement of it in 1993, how much damage was done throughout that building, how much chaos there was at that time. These are 2 coordinated airplane attacks on the building on the upper reaches of it. That will have an enormous structural effect. Those buildings, I think that it's fair to say, will probably have to be brought down. It's too early to speculate on that, but there's been that kind of damage.
Let's talk again. You were talking about
Here we have somebody actually
this is a
on the
reporter
scene.
here in New York from WNBC. You talk about the fact this plane was taken from Boston on the way to Los Angeles. The reports are that it was being diverted to JFK. And just for people who aren't familiar with the geography of this area, the southern tip of Manhattan would be very much near the landing pattern for JFK Airport. It could have been easy for a hijacker to pretend that he was taking that plane to JFK and veer off at the last minute.
Yeah, I heard one eyewitness say that over Washington Square, which is in the lower reaches of Manhattan, he saw a plane go over at about 1,000 feet, apparently the American Airlines flight, and then do what he described as a sharp right turn right toward the World Trade Center. He then lost sight of it.
And one eyewitness here in this AP report says he was getting off a PATH train to the World Trade Center and saw bodies falling out of the building. As he approached it, police told him to get out of the building immediately. He ran outside and watched people jump out of the first building, and then there was a second explosion.
This footage we're seeing right now shows that the damage is so severe. I mean, we had seen what seemed to be 2 fairly self-contained impact craters before, and now it appears something much more dramatic has happened to at least one of those towers.
These pictures are beyond belief.
We have a report that the second plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey. This is an official who was speaking on the condition of anonymity. Again, there is no confirmation of that. We just know that there were 2 planes that went in. The first one apparently was an American Airlines flight that was from Boston to Los Angeles. We're now seeing it from the harbor view of this continuing damage and destruction to the World Trade Center.
Incidentally, Tom, I just want to interrupt you for 2 seconds because apparently Jamie Gangel has some more information for us. Jamie?
Spoken again to U.S. officials with access to the highest intelligence, and they are now confirming that it does appear that at the Pentagon it was a plane. Again, they are saying they believe now a third plane was involved at the Pentagon.
And of course, this has been the nightmare, Katie, for national security officials for a long time. We talk about nuclear bombs and those kinds of exchanges or invasions, but everyone has been terribly worried about the suitcase-sized bomb of some kind or an airplane or an attack on our subways in the large cities. And this, obviously, no one had anticipated. 3 airplanes that were deliberately aimed at critical targets in America. We can only hope that it's over for today, but officials are taking no chances on all of that. They're evacuating all critical buildings because, as Mr. Johnson said earlier, this is an open society. James Kallstrom from the FBI also pointing out that almost anyone can come in here. They have access to so many instruments that can be used as instruments of attack and terrorism, and that certainly has been the case today.
Let's go to our State Department correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Well, this from the FBI. The State Department has been evacuated. There was a meeting going on in the Operations Center. Other top officials were in the Situation Room at the White House. Colin Powell is in Bogota, Colombia, on a 2-day trip. But this very interesting information, Katie, Matt, and Tom, from the FBI, they had been operating a massive exercise from their hostage rescue unit. All of their top teams, about 50 personnel, helicopters, equipment, were in Monterey, California for the last 2 days, scheduled to fly back today commercially. So all of those people are out of place. It's fair to say, according to sources that we've talked to here at NBC, that the FBI rescue operations and other FBI operations are really in chaos right now because they can't reach their officials in New York. All of their phone lines are down, and now you've got all of their special experts on this stuck in Monterey, California, trying to get a military flight back because there are no longer commercial flights. So they are seriously out of pocket, and there is a real breakdown of the FBI anti-terror coordination team, which is, of course, the principal team that would lead any effort and was so effective under Jim Kallstrom in New York City during the World Trade Center bombing and the TWA explosion, which, of course, turned out not to be terror.
Andrea, is the State Department taking this claim of responsibility from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine seriously? Are they giving any credence to that, or are they dismissing it, or how do they feel about who might have been responsible for this?
I think it is far too early for them, even the best experts in the government, to figure this out. They have one instant reaction, as you know, and it could be wrong, but their immediate reaction in a case like this would be to look toward Osama bin Laden and the collateral groups connected to him, simply because he has proved with the embassy bombings in Africa that he is the one terror leader who is capable of this kind of highly coordinated attack. The bombings went off in Tanzania and in Kenya almost simultaneously. It was extraordinarily well coordinated. They proved their case to a jury effectively and have managed to develop a great deal of information from sources, from in fact turning some former members of his network.
Andrea?
So they believe, Tom, that he is the most likely person, but it's far too early to say anything.
We want to tell you that American Airlines has confirmed that one of its flights, American Airlines flight number 11 from Boston's Logan Airport, scheduled to go to LAX. It left at 8 a.m. this morning. 45 minutes later, it was diverted into the World Trade Center. It was the airline that was involved. We can only assume on a popular flight like that it probably had a capacity load of passengers and crew on board. There was a hijacking. That was the first plane that was involved. We don't know about the second plane yet, nor do we know the origins of a third plane that deliberately flew itself into the Pentagon this morning near the heliport NBC Jim Miklashevsky now has been forced to evacuate that building,
And
so we'll have to wait till we hear from him.
Saw some pretty dramatic pictures from the Pentagon just moments ago, Matt.
Let's go back to a few seconds ago. This is now about an hour after the first impact. We saw some dramatic footage of a portion of one of the Twin Towers, actually it appearing to fall away from the rest of the building. Can we go to the tape now? Here we go, right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
Let's go to Bob Bazell, who is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob, what's going on there? What can you tell us?
Katie, St. Vincent's Hospital is one of the hospitals that's closest to the World Trade Center. In the last few minutes, ambulances have been coming in one right after another. Most of the people they're bringing in have second and third degree burns, very serious burn victims. They say the smoke inhalation people will probably be the most serious, but they're not even close to getting to them yet. There's a triage operation that's going on in the area. Ambulances are being dispatched to every hospital in New York City. The entire staff of this hospital has come in from wherever they are, and it's true at hospitals across New York City. They're standing there. As soon as an ambulance pulls in, dozens of medical workers rush up to it. But it's a carnage that's just beginning. Everybody here, the emergency service workers I spoke to who have been down into the World Trade Center site, say this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be massive amounts of casualties.
Bob, what are they telling you about people? Were there many people inside the building, or is it just too early to tell where the people were?
Well, there were certainly, probably hundreds, even thousands of people in the building, even though it was before 9 o'clock on the start of the usual work period, because it's just such a large area. So the number of casualties is just enormous, and they're just beginning to sort it out and just starting to get to the first few that they can get to. But the ambulances are just coming in. They're lined up. Every ambulance in New York City has been summoned. They're standing in a queue. They go in as soon as they can get a victim and bring them up here right away.
Bob, we're also looking at the lower end of Manhattan now as a result of the collapse of one World Trade Center. That whole financial district is now engulfed in smoke and debris, and there probably is going to be a lot more smoke inhalation problems as a result of what's going on.
Almost certainly, Tom. I was actually standing and saw that collapse, and everybody here just gasped, and even the medical workers and the ambulance attendants, when they saw that, the people who are used to tragedy, grabbed each other and hugged each other, and some started to cry.
And of course, one wonders about the triage unit.
Exactly, we're close to the base of that building trying to evacuate people, and when a building of that size falls, it does not fall in its own footprint.
No, absolutely. I am, I'm several blocks north of there, so I don't know what that area looks like, but one can only imagine.
Well, the consequences go on, not just to the World Trade Center and to the poor people who were trapped and caught there, but of course that is the heart of the world financial markets, which have now been shut down effectively as well. So the ripple effect continues this morning as we all try to adjust psychologically and intellectually to what we are witnessing here. It is difficult to comprehend, but this country, the strongest country in the world, has been the target of a major coordinated terrorist attack. And the end is not over yet, even if it's confined to just these three targets. The ripple effect goes on. All air traffic has been shut down. There will be no financial markets in place today. Business has been stopped across the country.
And of course, who knows the human toll that will be the result of this action. Matt actually just pointed out to me on any given day, 50,000 people, Tom, work at the World Trade Center.
And at 8:45 in the morning, if they're not in the building, they're around the building. That's a beehive of activity down there. There is no more active area in terms of pedestrian traffic.
I hate to keep going back to the collapse of that tower, but if you consider that this plane hit at mid-structure, and that would have probably taken out the electrical in the building where elevators wouldn't work, and people struggling to get some way out of that tower, and it takes a long time to come down over 100 stories, and to think about the possible loss of life that just occurred by the collapse of that southeastern tower is just amazing. Minna Kathuria is with the Today Show, and she apparently saw the collapse of one of those towers. Minna?
Yes, hi, Matt.
Tell me what you saw.
Well, on the corner of Duane and West Broadway, walking down towards the Twin Towers, and it just collapsed. It looked like it looked sort of like the building just demolished. Smoke, clouds, clouds of smoke everywhere. People running towards me. I was going towards the Twin Towers. People were going away from the towers, and it was just people running like I've never seen a scene like it.
Have you, from where you were, Minna, did you see many of the injured being treated? Is there any indication as the type of perimeter that the EMS people were dealing with?
No, I hadn't gotten that close yet. They were sort of blocking off the street. Now what they're doing is totally clearing out the area. And more emergency officials are coming in to help.
Can you just give me an idea of the reaction of people down there, Minna? Just pedestrians?
Everyone in tears. People who were. I met some woman who was in the building to the right of where the first thing happened, and just all crying, wondering if the people that they know in the buildings next door are okay.
Jamie, Minna, thank you very much. Minna, take care of yourself. Jamie Gangel, our national correspondent, is on the phone now with some more information. Jamie?
Katie, as you well know, buildings around town are being evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. And the Pentagon has been evacuated. Intelligence officials tell me that they do believe at the Pentagon that was a third plane going down. They have had, the intelligence sources that I've talked to say that they have not received any claim of responsibility yet.
Jamie, have you gotten any information from Reagan National Airport as to air traffic in the area this morning, or anybody who might have somehow traced this plane or figured out from where it came or where it was going?
They still do not have any of those details yet. It is almost impossible. They were confused for a long time as to whether it's a bomb or a plane. They say now that it appears to be a plane, but they say that is all the information that they have. As you know, the FAA has shut down all aircraft now, and they are now going back and trying to sort that out. But they do not have any information on that yet.
Do they know what type of plane it might have been?
There is no, unfortunately, they just don't have that yet.
All right, Jamie, thank you.
Now, we leave NBC's coverage just briefly for a moment to update you about the Australian Prime Minister John Howard. He is in Washington. He was apparently carrying out a press conference at the time of the plane crashes. He has been evacuated to a safe room at the Australian Embassy, we are being told. We will now go back to NBC's coverage.
An event to match the magnitude of this one, in which everything has been shut down in terms of air traffic. The national capital has been immobilized. The White House, State Department, Pentagon has been attacked. The financial markets have been shut down. There's an untold loss of life here in Manhattan, the nerve center of America, to say nothing of what's going on at the Pentagon.
When's the last time? I mean, this is a shot of New York City and downtown Manhattan that many people can't remember.
It looks
a
like
shot of one tower.
It looks like a movie, frankly,
Right, yeah.
that this is unfolding, and it combines the horror of the TWA Flight 800 bombing and the Murrah Federal Building, because it's both of these incidents, of course, coming together in the most horrific way.
By now, I would guess that everyone is up across all the time zones in America. It's 7:15 in the West, obviously, but for those of you who are just joining us at 8:45 Eastern Time, 8:42 Eastern Time today, an American Airlines flight 11 from Boston to LAX was crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. 15 minutes later, another plane hit the other one. That building has now collapsed. Within an hour of those two attacks, the Pentagon was hit, now we're told, by a plane, an untold number of casualties there. President Bush has been on the air. He was in Florida at the time saying apparently this was a terrorist attack. Everyone now believes that, carefully coordinated from the air. And the consequences of it in terms of human loss and the effect on this country are still to be determined.
We want to go now, Tom, to Kathleen Zichi, who's with NYU Downtown Hospital. They've been treating some of the injured. Kathleen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you tell me about the injuries you're seeing and the numbers of people you've been treating?
We've seen a steady stream of patients for approximately an hour and a half. Many appeared to be superficial injuries, but I can't tell you that I've seen the most serious ones because I believe they're going in through the ambulance bay. So we have a very high level of activity here. Our first priority is on the care of those patients. And we do not have an exact tally at this time because of the level of activity at the hospital. we've also been responding to family members and friends who have come seeking information to the hospital.
And just quickly, Kathleen, how far is the hospital from the World Trade Center?
The hospital is perhaps a 5-minute walk from the World Trade Center, and we were the first responder when the Trade Center was attacked in '93, so unfortunately we have some prior experience.
Yeah. What kind of medical support is there downtown? How many hospitals in the immediate area there that could help with the injured?
We are the only hospital south of 13th Street in New York City.
We are now getting reports there has been yet another explosion, a fourth explosion. This one is believed to be on Capitol Hill in Washington. We cross now live to CNN.
Go ahead.
Kate, I'm sorry, and if you've said this, I apologize, and I apologize to viewers too. Was there, to your knowledge, an explosion at the Capitol?
No, sir, there was not. I can see the Capitol from here. Everything looks to be fine. There was, however, Aaron, a sound about 5 minutes ago that sounded like some sort of explosion. Now, everything's in close proximity here in Washington. It could be that may have been something that happened at the Pentagon. We're not very clear on that. But we did hear a sound. We heard something that sounded like a loud boom about 5 minutes ago.
And Kate, you are again how far away from the Capitol building itself?
I'm standing on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is a main artery in Washington, D.C., and I'm about 2 blocks away from the Capitol. I did just see a spokesperson, by the way, for the Speaker of the House, Mr. Hastert, Dennis Hastert, who tells me that Mr. Hastert and other leaders have been evacuated into what he called a secure location. It's not clear where exactly they are, but they've been put somewhere secure.
And because we can't see it at this point, just give me a sense of what it looks like there. Are there many, many people on the street?
The sidewalks, people are calm. I think most people don't really know what's going on. Most people haven't been watching the news. But the sidewalks are definitely full of people where, normally at this time of the morning there wouldn't be that many people out here. And as I say, I've been passed by numerous members of Congress and senators and staff, who I know well, who have been coming past me asking me what's going on.
Kate, why don't you hang around here and continue to report on that. Let me just, again, for those viewers who are joining us at about 20 minutes past 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, let me just briefly recap. Attacks on 2 American cities, New York and the Capitol in Washington. It began at about 8:45 Eastern Time when a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. That was the building hit first. And then about a half an hour later, a second plane, and I'm not sure if we have the tape available. If we do, we'll show it to you. You can see the second plane coming in from the right side of your screen, going into the tower itself. This is an extraordinary and troubling piece of tape. The Justice Department is now being evacuated. The second attack on the Trade Center occurred about a half an hour or so after the first one. We have a report, CNN has been told, that an American Airlines 767 jet was hijacked out of Boston today. We don't know which of those 2 planes hit the tower the second time. In the last 10 minutes or so, the South Tower, or at least a portion of the South Tower, has collapsed. CNN's David Ensor joins us from Washington. David, where in the Capitol are you now?
Well, Aaron, I'm in our bureau, but I have on the telephone with me Barbara, who is the wife of a friend of mine and who is an eyewitness to exactly what happened at the Pentagon. Barbara, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, what exactly did you see? Let's look at the Pentagon now as you describe what exactly happened at the Pentagon this morning.
As we were driving into town on 395, there was an exit. We were trying to get off the exit for the Memorial Bridge. Off to the left-hand side was a commercial plane that came in and was coming too fast and too low. And the next thing we saw was it go down below the side of the road, and we just saw the fire that came up after that.
How large was the explosion?
It was large.
Was there sound as well?
That I can't verify because the windows were up in the vehicle.
Was it clear to you what had happened?
Yes, definitely.
So you believe it was a commercial airliner that was hitting the Pentagon?
Yes, and I'm not sure exactly where the Pentagon was in relationship to where the plane went down. But they are relatively close to one another. Whether it hit any part of that Pentagon, I'm not sure.
How low was the plane?
When it was coming down?
Yeah.
It was coming down on less than a 45-degree angle and coming down toward the side of the 395. And when it came down, it just missed the 395 and went down below it, and then you saw the fire come up from it.
Were you able to see what kind of plane or what airline it belonged to?
No, I did not see what kind of an airline. I just assumed because we were so close to the airport, it was coming into land.
But it seemed awfully low to you.
Yes, and fast.
How big was the fireball?
I'm spatially challenged at times, and it was pretty big.
What did you think was happening?
I know that hit the ground and exploded.
Were you frightened yourself?
Yes. Everybody stopped the cars, and we all got it and so forth.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your talking to us. Aaron, back to you.
David, thank you. CNN's David Ensor in Washington. CNN's Brian Palmer joins us on the phone from here in Manhattan. Brian, why don't you begin by telling me where you are?
We are in front of the criminal courthouse after being pushed north slightly. We watched one of the towers of the World Trade Center disappear from the skyline. It basically folded into itself in a plume of gray smoke. A crowd of thousands of people dashed up Broadway, followed by emergency services personnel. That's all we know now. We're watching the plume of smoke and debris just sort of waft across lower Manhattan, and people are lining up at this payphone behind me trying to find out whether their relatives are safe.
Let me just briefly go to Randy. Randy, just look out there and tell me what you're thinking when you see what now appears that at least part of one of the landmark buildings in this city, one of the most recognizable buildings in the country, is gone.
It's the kind of moment you hope will never come. When you have been in government, when you care as much about this city and this country as a mayor like Rudy Giuliani does, it's a moment you pray will never come, and you pray for the families of anyone affected by this tragedy. But as a city, we come together, and our emergency services provide every support they can in the face of such a senseless tragedy.
It is an unbelievable scene as
Incredible.
You look down. I mean, we stand here at some point every day looking out at this city this time of year. It's extraordinarily pretty, and you see those two buildings high above lower Manhattan, and you look out there today and you see this gaping hole in one of them, these plumes of smoke that continue to pour from the scene, and you know that there's nothing behind. That second tower, or at least parts of it, are gone. We join now one of our affiliates, WNYW, and their coverage here.
And we'll leave CNN's coverage right there for the moment. Just recapping what has happened in New York and Washington tonight. 2 planes have crashed into the upper floors of both World Trade Center towers just minutes apart. One tower has since collapsed. Within the hour, an aircraft crashed on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon, and the West Wing of the White House was evacuated amid threats of terrorism. Other government departments are being evacuated. Our Prime Minister John Howard was giving a press conference in Washington. He has been evacuated to a safe room at the Australian Embassy. President George W. Bush has already ordered a full-scale investigation. A US official says one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center had been hijacked after takeoff from Boston bound for Los Angeles. All planes have been grounded across the country, across the United States. All bridges and tunnels into Manhattan are closed, and several subway lines were immediately shut down. Trading on Wall Street was suspended. We're now going to return you to the coverage by NBC.
Quickly into a car to take him to an alternative command site. Do you have me? They were taking Admiral Clark to an alternative command site. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we do, Nick. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's no confirmation of this latest threat, but security officials here are taking it very seriously. We were standing with Secretary Rumsfeld's security detail, who, as soon as they got the report, went running into the building, and we were herded away. But they have set up an alternative command site somewhere in the area. The Pentagon has set up a crisis team to deal with this situation. But so far, the latest reports are that another plane of some kind may have been hijacked and headed in this direction. Katie?
Yeah, we also should tell you, Mick, this is Tom Brokaw, that the FAA now says that all international flights headed for the United States are being diverted to Canada. This at a time when, as Jim Miklashevsky is telling us, there's an unconfirmed report that there's been another hijacking. All takeoffs were stopped, but there were planes in the air, obviously, at the time of these first two attacks on the Twin Trade Towers and then on the Pentagon.
Andrea Mitchell is standing by with more information. She was at the State Department. Andrea?
The State Department, as you know, has been evacuated. Secretary of State Colin Powell is now en route home from Lima, Peru. He did not get to his destination of Bogota, Colombia today, so that trip canceled. He, as all other officials, heading back. State Department officials and the White House officials and the NSC have all been evacuated as well, although Condi Rice was earlier in the Situation Room, and CIA Director George Tenet has been holding meetings in his office in Langley, Virginia. And as we reported earlier, key FBI team members from their rescue efforts and anti-terror coordinating team were stranded in Monterey, California, where they were on a secret military exercise against exactly this kind of event.
Andrea, let me interrupt for a second. Can you tell us any more about reports we're getting that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department?
I do not have confirmation of that.
All right.
They did evacuate the State Department, but we do not have confirmation at this moment about a car bomb outside the State Department. You know...
Andrea, thanks. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're going to go back to Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon. Mick?
Now, we'll just break into the coverage for a moment again there. Authorities are also concerned about the safety of former US President Bill Clinton. He is in Australia, of course. He's in Port Douglas at the moment. We believe there is a plane on standby in Cairns, possibly to evacuate Bill Clinton. We'll now take you back to NBC's coverage.
Hijacked and headed in this general direction. So far, all we see are security helicopters circling the Pentagon. Again, the skies are crystal clear blue, and I can't see the speck of an airplane, but security forces here are obviously alarmed enough not only to tell people to keep some distance from the building, but to take immediate cover.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Well, actually, let's look at these live pictures at the World Trade Center. The other tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed. You are looking at live pictures of the second twin tower at the World Trade Center collapsing as a result of the crash of an airplane into its side. That, I believe, was the first tower that was struck this morning at 8:42 Eastern Time.
You're not there.
It is now,
fallen
to the ground and
the profile of
collapsed.
Manhattan has been changed. There's been a declaration of war by terrorists on the United States. There's nothing short of that.
Pat Dawson, excuse me, Tom, is down at the scene. Pat?
Where's Wing? Where's Wing? Where's Wing?
Pat, can you hear us? Obviously, there is pandemonium downtown. Pat is not far from the World Trade Center, as you can hear from the sirens, and you can only imagine the confusion and the terror that is in that area after not one but both Trade Center towers have now collapsed.
More than 100 stories of steel, concrete, electrical. Here it is. That's a videotape replay.
We are back at 10:30 Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning, this horrific, incredible, not to be believed Tuesday morning. You are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center where just a few minutes ago, within the last minute actually, the second twin tower collapsed. Just to recap, if you're just joining us, around 8:42 Eastern Time this morning here in New York City, a plane crashed into the right twin tower of the World Trade Center about 2/3 of the way up the building, leaving a huge gaping hole, a huge fire, and tons of billowing smoke. About 25 minutes later, a second jet, believed to be a 727 or a 737,
some reports of a 757 even,
then crashed in the second twin tower. The first plane, incidentally, was en route from Boston, Massachusetts to Los Angeles.
Here's the video, I think, of the second plane striking the tower.
That's right. We're not sure the origin of that plane, is my understanding. The first plane that caused that hole on the right-hand side in the other twin tower was from Boston to LAX to Los Angeles. It was Flight 11, American Airlines. We have confirmed that that plane was hijacked. What happened following the hijacking is unclear. We should note that about an hour after the first collision at the Pentagon, reportedly another plane crashed into the Pentagon, which is just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. All air traffic has been stopped.
Government buildings have been evacuated, as have other buildings across the country. The Sears Tower in Chicago was evacuated. You can imagine that other buildings in major cities and small cities around the country are probably being evacuated as well.
There's an unconfirmed report of a car bomb at the State Department. We haven't not been able to pin that down. There is also, Jim Miklashevsky was told that there was an unconfirmed report of another air hijacking. We share this with you not in an attempt to in any way exacerbate what is already a terrible situation, but so much has come true today based on these early reports that we want you to have as much information as we can possibly get. At the Pentagon, all people outside were told to take cover just moments ago, but Jim Miklashevsky said the skies were clear.
There was an unconfirmed report of another hijacking with a plane headed towards Washington. Again, we don't want to sound alarmist, but that is something that Mick heard while he was at the Pentagon. We also want to mention that the president is en route from Longboat Key, Florida, where he was there to visit an elementary school to talk about literacy. Obviously, clearly, his agenda has changed dramatically. He will convene a meeting of the National Security Council as soon as he gets home. Colin Powell is also on his way back from Lima, Peru. He was scheduled to be in Bogota, Colombia.
And probably not at the White House. They'll probably take him to a safe location. There are a number of them, some in the hills of Virginia, as you know. And my guess is that Air Force One is in the unusual situation of having a fighter plane escort on its way back from Florida today. That's where we stand.
Think about the loss of life that we could have seen this morning. If you think about the fact that when full, the World Trade Centers hold about 50,000 people, no telling how many people were at work before 9 o'clock this morning and then shortly after 9 o'clock in the other tower. But if you look at this picture here, Tom and Katie, at Lower Manhattan, it appears that terrorists have succeeded this time in doing what terrorists tried to do back in 1993.
This is war. This is a declaration and an execution of an attack on the United States, two of our most conspicuous symbols of the American system of capitalism. The Pentagon, which of course is the headquarters of the most mighty military in the world, was attacked today as well. The White House has been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. Financial markets have been immobilized. All flights taking off after these attacks were grounded.
International flights have been sent to Canada.
It turns out it's transatlantic flights, only going to Canada now. So there has been great chaos visited upon this country, to say nothing, as you pointed out, Matt, so importantly, of the still untold loss of life, and it's going to be horrendous. We don't know yet what the exact numbers are, but we can only tell you by looking at those pictures that you can guess as well as that we can, that there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to escape that.
Back in 1993, when the bomb blew up in the basement of the World Trade Center, so many survivors talked about how long it took them, with no power in the elevators, to walk down the smoke-filled stairways. And you think about how many people were still trying to escape those buildings when first one and then the second tower collapsed.
And of course, the triage unit that has been set up. Area hospitals are all receiving victims. And as Matt said, 50,000 capacity when everybody is in the building. But many people at 8:42 a.m. here in New York are at their desks, working in their offices. One young man or one man was reached by phone and was asked, what is happening there? And he said, we are blanking, dying here. And there was screaming and yelling and pure chaos, understandably, going on in the background.
There's a picture of Lower Manhattan, ladies and gentlemen, the most important city in the world in so many ways. And now it has been attacked by terrorists at the World Trade Center, and the damage is beyond our ability to tell you in great detail.
Let me mention that,
I was going to say, here's what the president said. He canceled an education appearance in Florida. Here's what he said just a short time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the governor of New York, to the director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
That was George W. Bush about an hour ago speaking from Longboat Key, Florida. He is en route to Washington, D.C. We're looking at some pictures on the ground, or we were, of apparently some of the victims. He is on the ground.
Quite extraordinary. These are the emergency workers who are coming back. It was just about 10 minutes ago that we described to you the possibility of that North Tower collapsing. About 5 minutes after we went off the air, it did collapse. Once again, we have no idea at this point the loss of life. I can only tell you there were hundreds of emergency workers down there, about 5 or 6 blocks. It took probably about, I would say, no more than 50 or 60 seconds for that dust cloud, dust and smoke, to literally make it the 5 or 6 blocks up here and begin to envelop us, at which point we started to move out of the way. There were literally dozens and dozens of firemen who were trying to run past us. In fact, our cameraman even put one of the captains in his car and drove him down to a command post. The people who you see here are pretty much all emergency workers. Many of them that I have seen in the last 2 to 3 minutes, quite frankly, are coming out of here. And remember this, these are professionals. They're coming out of there looking literally stunned, in shock, many of them, struggling for breath, obviously in serious distress. Breathing problems are the biggest problem for those who manage to make it safely out of that area down below us. You can't see much more than a block south of me right now. And the World Trade Center probably stands about 10 blocks south of where I am at this moment. And as you can see now, the dust is beginning to pick up here. It really depends on which way the wind blows as to whether or not we get heavy dust or not. But at this point, I can tell you that in the first few minutes, emergency workers were trying just basically to get out of there, to survive. You could see that written in their faces. The situation was so desperate, they just wanted to get out of there. Now, many of them are beginning to regroup. A couple of them asked me where their commander might be. They're trying to get together and go back in there and try to take care of the people who obviously are in serious trouble. There's no other way to describe it. The language here, at times, if I slip into language which seems a little melodramatic, forgive me, but this is a circumstance which is very, very difficult to describe in many ways without sounding melodramatic. Certainly in more than 20 years of covering horrific events, this is something that I've never seen before. As we say, the emergency workers now beginning to try to gather themselves. Over there you can see a police emergency service unit. They're trying basically now to reestablish some kind of a safe perimeter. And many of the emergency workers basically just happy to be alive. Certainly that picture tells it all. Many of them just happy to be alive at this point, having survived what is an extraordinary event, the collapse of 2 towers. As we said earlier in our report, 110 stories each. I will tell you that what I saw fall had to be at least 40, 50 stories of that building at first. The skeleton was left at about, I would say, the 50 or 60th floor after the shell, after the structure of the building fell down. The skeleton, the steel skeleton, was literally sheaved off, and it took probably about another 30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last we saw of the World Trade Center, and that was maybe 10 minutes ago when that final skeleton, the metal skeleton, steel skeleton, collapsed into the street.
That was NBC's Pat Dawson again. He's standing about 10 blocks from where the World Trade Center towers used to stand. You're looking at the collapse of one of those towers right now. We now have an AP News alert out of Pittsburgh. Officials at Somerset County Airport are confirming the crash of a large plane just north of the airport. That's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Again, officials at Somerset County Airport confirm the crash of a large plane north of that airport, which is located about 80 miles to the southeast of the city of Pittsburgh. We do not know whether that crash of that plane is related to what has become an obvious terrorist attack both here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon.
Matt, we just got a late word that State Department security...
Now, as we look at those first pictures from the ground to do with this absolute disaster in the United States, we're going to talk to an Australian man. He's from Melbourne, Hamish Berry, who is in New York. He's called in. Hamish, thank you for your time. Where are you?
I'm in the financial district, about 3 blocks from what was the World Trade Center, sitting on the 56th floor, looking straight out at it.
What did you see?
Well, I was just sitting at my desk, and it was about 9 a.m. in the morning, and I just heard this huge explosion and looked up, and the taller tower was sort of blazing at about the 80th or 90th floor, and debris was falling out from it. And then everyone came into my office, and we were just watching the blaze, and as we watched, about 10 minutes later, a large commercial airliner ploughed into the next tower, and there was a huge explosion. And it was pretty upsetting, really.
It must have been. We've seen pictures quite clearly that have been recorded of that second plane coming in and smashing into what I believe is the southern tower. What was the reaction from you and your workmates?
Well, when the first one happened, everyone was just a bit stunned, I think. But then as we actually saw the plane hit the second time, there was people sort of broke down, and obviously a lot of people here know people that work in those buildings, so they're pretty concerned for them. And, you know, obviously people will have lost a lot of friends and loved ones. So there was sort of a lot of, I guess, panic here. And people immediately started to evacuate our building, which is, as I said, about 3 blocks from here, from the World Trade Center, sorry.
Now, what are you doing now? Are you going to be evacuated? Are you heading out?
No, it's basically like a whiteout here. It's almost like a snowstorm, and there's a lot of debris floating around in the air. So we've been told to stay in the building because there could be, you know, gases and things out there that we shouldn't be breathing in. So at the moment we're just sitting here looking at a whiteout. Looks like a snowstorm.
So you believe it's safer to stay in the building you're in?
That's right. We were standing here watching, and as both towers collapsed about half an hour after the planes had gone into them, and that didn't seem to affect our building apart from just sending a whole lot of smoke into the air. It obviously shook the ground, but our building seems to be okay.
What type of building, what type of work do you do there? Is it a government building?
No, we're in a private enterprise building. I work for a law firm here, and have been here only a couple of months. And ironically, I do aircraft financing. So everyone in my department was fairly shocked to see planes go into the building.
It's just an incredible sight, isn't it? Look, thank you very much for your time. Take care, and thanks for joining 7 News tonight.
Not a problem. Thanks, Natalie.
And then the second building did as
well.
And
we're now going back to NBC's live coverage.
There is a kind of a surreal quality, but that is the epicenter of a great, great national tragedy and a great loss of life. No question about it this morning.
We're talking about people who were hurt, perhaps killed in this blast. Many of them have been brought to area hospitals, including St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob Bazell is there. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, Katie, ambulances continue to stream in. Several New York City streets have been closed. Major avenues have been closed off so that ambulances can continue to come in. In addition, the New York City subway system has now been closed down, and several buildings that were not involved in the World Trade Center area have been shut down, and people have been told to go home, but a lot of them are just wandering aimlessly on the street. Many people openly weeping and hugging each other. This is clearly is a time that, as Tom described, is very close to the beginning of a war, and but the casualties do keep coming in. Burns, smoke inhalation, very severe, and again, all the medical people that I've talked to say this is just the tip of the iceberg. We expect casualties could be coming in all through the night and way into tomorrow and beyond.
Bob, if you could just stand by for a moment, because we have this report from AP that I'm just simply going to read. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Airport officials said the plane, believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed around 10 a.m. about 8 miles east of Jennerstown, according to County 911 dispatchers. WPXI-TV reported. The crash came the same morning that terrorists crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center in New York City, and the twin 110-story towers collapsed. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon and the State Department, although that was refuted moments ago, and spread fear across the nation. There was no other immediate details on the Pennsylvania crash, and it was not clear whether the crash was related to the others. Again, that was a report, a bulletin that was just issued by the Associated Press.
You know what is so stunning about all of this, Matt and Katie, is that there has been no indication whatsoever that this very carefully coordinated massive attack was going to occur. There's been a complete intelligence failure here, and there will be, obviously, down the road, a price to pay for that.
Well, that's actually not all that surprising, Tom, because we've often talked in the past, following every terrorist event, about how vulnerable the United States is, and many terrorist experts say how unprepared they are. And the question, of course, is, can you ever prepare for an attack like this?
Well, that's true, but we also have people out there who are in listening posts, and we've penetrated these kinds of organizations, but to have this kind of an attack, this sophisticated, this efficient, striking at the heart of the nation's capital, striking at the heart of New York City. Now, and if this is true that this plane went down as a result of this attack, we don't know whether it's the end of it. Right. This is a massively well-coordinated attack of some kind that is nothing short but of a declaration of war on this country.
And terrorist experts are now saying, and intelligence experts are now saying, that there are very short or very few number of terrorist groups that are capable of this kind of planning, and a couple of names come to mind, and I'm not going to throw them out now because we certainly don't have any reports. Before I go to Jamie Gangel, I just want to say that some of the descriptions coming from eyewitnesses in Lower Manhattan of these explosions occurring are chilling. One man talked about getting off a PATH train, that's a subway train here in Lower Manhattan, and looking up at the building after the first explosion and seeing people jump out of the windows. We have no idea how high up, but hearing people on the ground scream each time another person jumped out of a window, attempting to get to safety. And then when the second explosion occurred, he felt the heat of the explosion on the back of his neck. Jamie Gangel is our national correspondent. She's joining us now on the phone. Jamie?
Matt, you know, speaking of those intelligence officials that you were just mentioning, now finally we can no longer reach on the phone anyone at the CIA. Apparently the CIA has been evacuated. We know the National Security Agency, which is the electronic eavesdropping agency, which is south of Baltimore near Fort Meade, Maryland, that they have been shut down. What we're hearing from both places is that all non-essential personnel have been told to leave. And I can only imagine that probably they are trying to move some of their operations out of those buildings as well for backup procedure. But in addition to whatever intelligence was or was missed in all of this, we now have perhaps some problems gathering intelligence as those buildings are now being shut down.
Right, Jamie, thank you very much. Tom, let's go back and talk about something you mentioned a second ago, that is just, it shows the enormity of this situation. In addition to what we assume will be horrendous loss of life, all planes in this country have been grounded. I mean, you think about the impact that has, and I mean, is there ever a time we can imagine something like that ever happening before?
The most powerful nation in the world, and national security officials and terrorist experts have been saying for some time, a small band of very willful and sophisticated people can bring us to a halt, and they have done just that. There's a psychological terror as a result of all of this, as you can only imagine how it plays out across the country today. People looking in who don't live in New York or live in the nation's capital are wondering what happens around me. It is hard to overstate the consequences of all of this, and this is just the beginning. We'll be living with this story and dealing with the consequences of it for some time. The United States will change as a result of all of this. We already thought that there was a lot of security in America at the airports and so on, and yet there was a successful hijacking at Boston Airport today, and the consequences of that we're seeing on the screen here this morning. So this is going to change this country profoundly in not just the coming days, but the coming months, to say nothing as you have been saying, Matt, of the horrific loss of life that we're witnessing.
On that subject, you know, and Katie and Tom, to complete a thought I started before, you both were out at the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, a much smaller building, and it took rescue workers more than a week to find all the people trapped in that wreckage. We have a building here two buildings of each 110 stories. It's mind-boggling to think of what it's going to take over these next days and weeks to find survivors or victims of these explosions.
And of course, it continues to be a terrifying situation because there are a number of planes up in the air as this took place, and a number of unconfirmed and frightening reports about those planes that we heard earlier from Jim Miklashevsky, that somebody had gotten word at the Pentagon that perhaps there is another plane, whether they were talking about the one north of Pittsburgh or it's completely unclear. And it's also unclear whether these planes that were en route to a destination have been grounded themselves. In other words, that there were emergency landings or what. I think it's very difficult to get any communication with airports all across the country because they're, I'm sure, completely chaotic.
Katie, you know from your time in Oklahoma City and all the time that you spent with the victims there, the psychological effect of all of this on this country and how it's going to affect our whole sense of security and, in a way, our sense of innocence about this is Fortress America. It couldn't happen here. We said that about the Murrah Federal Building. We even said it about Columbine High School. This is an incident of a whole different magnitude.
I have to say, I've never, ever, witnessed anything quite as horrific. I hate to keep saying it because we have seen these types of things play out in movies and, you know, in worst case scenarios and in dramatic renditions of this kind of incident, but certainly no one has ever seen this kind of thing unfold. And it is really shocking.
We want to go now on the phone. We have Neil Livingston, who is an expert on terrorism. Mr. Livingston, can you hear me?
I can.
You know, we were talking about what it would take in terms of planning and coordination to pull off an attack like this with so many prongs. At least 2 attacks here in New York City, 1 in Washington, D.C. We don't know if the crash of that plane outside Pittsburgh is related, but give me an idea of how many groups there are in the country that would be capable of something like this.
Well, there are very few groups in the world capable of this kind of action. And you have to remember also that we have the people who hijacked these planes were going to a certain death as well. So they were suicide bombers, in effect. And that probably suggests that this was not something like the Medellin cartel or one of the other groups that has the financial wherewithal and the infrastructure to carry out coordinated attacks.
Yeah, I know.
I think that obviously the finger of suspicion, and we're always very cautious about pointing that in any particular direction, but we have to look to the Middle East. We have to look to Osama bin Laden. We have to look at some Palestinian groups right now.
But even in the past, when we were talking about Osama bin Laden and his group, there have been intelligence experts who've picked up conversations, transmissions that occurred before an attack to give some kind of indication, even if we didn't understand them till after the attack. Is it unusual that with so many prongs to an attack that there wouldn't have been some type of warning through intelligence sources?
Well, it's a myth that we always know that these things are coming down. Part of our problem is, and we just had a warning go out to our embassies and military bases in the Far East. That could have been a feint. That could have been a diversion. We have so many warnings these days that people, they tend to fade into the background noise unless we have real specific information about an upcoming attack. Generally, we don't take action, and these groups are very hard to penetrate. They're focused with bonds of kinship and people who have known each other for years. So it doesn't surprise me that we didn't know that this was coming.
All right, Mr. Livingston, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Benjamin Levy is at the scene near the World Trade Center. Actually, he's going to tell us precisely where he is and what he saw. Benjamin, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Benjamin?
Yes?
Hi, it's Katie Couric. Can you tell me where you are and what you have seen or what you are seeing?
Well, right now I'm in Lower Manhattan, but I was working, I work at the Federal Building behind City Hall. And we were just sitting at our desks about 9 a.m. this morning. We heard a big explosion. Then about 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes later, we saw the other plane hit the building, the second tower, and then we just evacuated. And as we started to walk away, we turned around about maybe 15 minutes after we left the building, and the second tower just disappeared from sight. And I tell you, I've never seen anything more horrible in my entire life.
Did you see any people, any casualties, Mr. Levy?
We we bumped into a guy from Tower 1 who said that he had a chance to get out of the building after the plane hit the first one. He had a chance to get out of the second one, but he said that people were jumping out of the windows to get away from the fire.
Where are you now, Benjamin?
I'm in a hair salon in Lower Manhattan, talking to you guys.
Well, obviously that was.
And was the whole federal building evacuated, Mr. Levy?
Yeah. Well, we started running out of the building as soon as we saw the second explosion, and then I work on the 22nd floor. And as soon as we were down at the bottom, they sounded the alarm, and then they announced evacuation. But most of us were already out.
How far physically are you actually from the World Trade Center?
Right now, or where?
No, when this happened.
About 6 blocks away.
6 blocks away. And you were able to get out pretty easily, and there were no kind of electrical problems in your building as a result of the impact of the fire or anything like that?
No, we got out pretty good, thank God.
And as that whole area down there, the City Hall, the Federal Building, and all the other commercial buildings, they've all been evacuated as well?
Well, yeah, as we were leaving, the police were telling all the shop owners to shut their shops and go home.
And that must be enveloped by the smoke and dust and everything that we see now, because that covers the entire lower end of Manhattan, which is a considerably large area, not only physically, but in terms of the financial networks, the commerce that is done there, a lot of residential areas.
Yeah, you could smell the smoke. And you could smell it, but it wasn't. We were walking away from it.
Benjamin Levy. Benjamin, thanks so much for talking with us. We appreciate it, and we're glad you're safe.
Katie, I've got just a little rundown here, if I can, Matt, for just a moment about what's going on around the country. The State Department officials have been moved into the State Department Training Center in Arlington, Virginia. The state has been evacuated, obviously. In Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport shut down. The IDS Center in downtown Minneapolis, tallest building, evacuated. Georgia, all flights at Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport closed. The CNN Center, world headquarters of cable news network, was closed to the public. In Maryland, officials are tightening security throughout the state. Of course, that's the home of Andrews Air Force Base. Navy installations throughout the Hampton Roads, home to the world's largest Navy base, have been placed under increased security. In Pennsylvania, Philadelphia International Airport has been closed, and of course the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall are being closed as well.
In fact, all national monuments, Tom, I believe, have been evacuated and closed.
And California, the state has been put on the highest alert. They're on tactical alert in Los Angeles. The Department of Energy's Nuclear Weapons and Research Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, put under heightened security.
It is now coming up on 10:59 East Coast time. We'll give you a recap of what we've seen so far in just a moment. Just a quick note from one of the hospitals downtown in New York City, where they say that hundreds of people...
And you're watching 7 News' special coverage of this crisis across the United States. We are hearing reports that fighter aircraft are patrolling the skies over Washington. All air traffic has been shut down nationwide, and there are unconfirmed reports of another plane possibly heading towards Washington, possibly to the Pentagon. With that news, acting Prime Minister, Australian Prime Minister John Anderson is apparently holding talks with US counterparts to see whether we should implement any extra security measures at Australian airports. So obviously this is affecting worldwide. We'll now return to NBC's coverage.
The World Trade Center.
A ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. People were coming out with masks over their face, anything they could put over their face, because the air was still very thick with debris. The ash on the ground is at least 2 inches thick. It's more like snow cover, a very eerie snow cover blanketing downtown Manhattan right now. Now, at the time, I was back on the corner again of Broadway and Park Place. At that time, the police started running toward us, telling everybody to move who was left on the street. I looked up, and that's when I heard the pardon me. That's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down. Again, whoever was left on the street started stampeding. I'm in the office. Right now I'm in the main building of Pace University. People are crying. They have gas masks on their face. Authorities are making people go toward the basement. They're just doing anything that they can to move people away from the financial district. But again, it is a very horrifying scene down here, very eerie, like a ghost town.
Patty, let me interrupt you. Mayor Giuliani is on the telephone, is part of New York One's coverage. We join our affiliate for that.
Mayor Giuliani, since we have New Yorkers listening, and obviously their thoughts are with the people who are down there.
Urge them to remain calm, to remain at home, or to remain at their place of business, unless they're in Lower Manhattan. By that I mean south of Canal Street. If you're south of Canal Street, get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It'll also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the urban search and rescue team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible. And the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet. But right now, we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of if there is, in fact, some system being implemented, what that system is, and where people are being taken?
People are triaging. People are being taken to every area hospital possible, even virtually within minutes. I drove down right past St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could see them actually on the street ready to take people, and that was within minutes of the first airplane hitting the World Trade Center. So the hospitals are ready. We'll be moving them to all different area hospitals, triaging them. The main thing is having those streets open so that we can get people in and out of the southern part of Manhattan as quickly as possible, so that we can move them, to hospitals all over the city.
And Mayor Giuliani, we'll let you...
Is in place. They're doing it. We just need the cooperation of people in getting out of there.
We'll let you get back to the operations there, and we do appreciate you taking the time for us here.
But once again, the only thing to do now is to remain calm and try to assist in the rescue effort.
Thank you.
Now let's pray.
That's New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani talking to a CNN affiliate New York One here, saying that clearly there's going to be tremendous number of lives lost on these attacks here in New York, urging people to stay calm and to leave the area calmly. The area is in the southern part of Manhattan, way down on the tip of Manhattan Island. The mayor urging people to calmly move north. CNN's Jamie McIntyre is at the Pentagon. Jamie, why don't you start, if you can, at the beginning here as we try and put some order to all of this. What happened?
Well, let me just describe the scene that we have here, and I'll back up a little bit. But right now I'm looking at the charred facade of the Pentagon, a huge gaping hole on the side where the Pentagon heliport is located, the side that faces Arlington Cemetery. In front of me is a long line of rescue personnel with backboards. They're just waiting for victims to be brought out so they can rush them to nearby medical facilities. I see a few victims being treated on the grass outside the Pentagon. Firefighters continue to pour streams of water onto the side of the building, and huge black cloud of smoke continues to billow out. It is a scene of utter destruction here. I'm sure it pales in comparison to the World Trade Center, but I've never seen anything like this myself in the history of the Pentagon. There's been nothing like this. Again, a huge gaping hole. You can see the exposed 5 floors of the Pentagon offices just ripped apart. Our report is that an aircraft of some kind, and at least one witness identified it as a civilian aircraft, hit the side of the building shortly after the incident in the World Trade Center this morning. People who were in their offices nearby reported hearing a huge explosion, seeing shards
shrapnel come by their window. The entire Pentagon has been evacuated. More time after this attack, there were urgent announcements made over the loudspeaker telling people to quickly get away from the building because they had reports of a second plane heading this way just 2 minutes away. F-16 jets were scrambled over the Pentagon. I saw several of them go by, but no second plane ever materialized, and the building remains completely evacuated as firefighters continue to pour columns of water on the devastated side of the Pentagon, and rescue personnel continue to whisk victims away. We have no report at this time of how many casualties. Clearly, dozens and dozens of people have been hurt, and we presume that there have been some deaths as well. It's hard to imagine otherwise, considering extent damage at the side of the building. And I can see just some of the windows side, a stretch of the building, perhaps 40 or 50 feet wide. Just looks like it has collapsed under the weight of the impact. Aaron?
Jamie, thank you. So we have planes hitting the Pentagon, or plane hitting the Pentagon, 2 planes hitting the World Trade Center's towers in New York. Alan Dodd-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Sabga and others have told you, all of Manhattan is covered, downtown Manhattan is covered with thick white ash and building material. The ambulances have been coming now from as far as Long Island. All the rescue workers are being equipped with gas or face filter masks, and firefighters have been arriving even by pickup truck. Otherwise, the streets are now deserted.
Alan, thank you. Alan Dodd-Frank in Manhattan. A little more on this plane crash, which is the 4th incident, if you will. There was the plane crash at the Pentagon, crashing into the Pentagon. There were the 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center here in New York. And we don't know whether this 4th one is related or not, but the report is that a 747 en route from Chicago to New York City crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the incident. That's what we are hearing.
Started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too.
Our colleague, Jeff Green, well, we have a little more sound here from witnesses.
I'm with the fire alarm company. The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know.
Get down! What's happening? She's right in front of the explosion!
I was in B tower. A tower.
What floor were you on?
B1.
What floor?
The first one.
What happened? Tell me.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out. His skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement. Came down. All of a sudden, the elevator blew up. Smoke. I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
Thank you.
The words of some of the witnesses here in Manhattan this morning, and the pictures. of what will, I suspect, before this is over, go down as one of the most horrific days in our lifetime. We're joined by our colleague, CNN's Jeff Greenfield.
Aaron, you know what? In 1993, when terrorists bombed the World Trade Center, their plan was to knock one of the towers into the other, bringing them both down. That disaster was averted, and bad as that was, in a sense, America was lucky. Another terrorist attack in the planning was interrupted to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel and submerge dozens, maybe hundreds of people. At the eve of the millennium, a suspected terrorist, was intercepted, you remember, at the Canadian border on his way to Seattle. And I know that not so long ago, former President Clinton, in a private talk to a group, ruminated on how lucky the United States has been over the years with the combination of luck and the skill of anti-terrorist people to avoid such things. What we are seeing now is nothing less than the worst nightmare that one could imagine come to life, probably worse than anyone could have imagined. You may remember that Tom Clancy wrote a novel that ends with a terrorist hijacker crashing into the Capitol. The worst act of terrorist violence on American soil, the Oklahoma City bombing, killed fewer than 200 people. All we know today is that tens of thousands of people worked in that complex that has been destroyed. And I hate to say it this way, but this may be the day that America's luck ran out.
Well, it is hard, isn't it? I mean, you look out here, and you see the Statue of Liberty to the right, and these buildings off to the left, the attacks on Washington. We don't know a lot about who's behind this or what this is all about, but the symbolism of these attacks is extraordinary. CNN's David Ensor is in Washington, and he joins us. David?
Aaron, I'm talking to U.S. officials who are obviously working on who is responsible for this. Their working thesis is that this is overseas terrorism, not domestic. They say they cannot rule out additional attacks yet to come. In terms of claims of responsibility so far, there is an Agence France-Presse report in which a group with the word Palestine in the name claims responsibility. There is also a report quoting personnel close to Osama bin Laden, the fugitive Saudi accused terrorist, denying that that group was involved. But again, U.S. officials say they can't shed any light on whether these reports are correct or incorrect. Usually when this kind of attack occurs, you have claims of responsibility from all sorts of people who had nothing to do with it. So it's a very fluid situation at this point. But the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States has been evacuated from its headquarters in Langley, Virginia. There are some key personnel still in the headquarters, but the operations center has been moved elsewhere. U.S. officials saying they don't want to talk about where exactly the headquarters staff and operations staff has been moved to. But that staff is focusing now on trying to find any shred of information that could help the U.S. government figure out who is doing this and how to put a stop to it. Aaron?
David, you tell me if I'm right or wrong here. As a practical matter, there are not a whole lot of groups that the United States government knows about that are sophisticated enough, have the kind of money, the resources to pull off something like this. Fair enough?
That's absolutely true. And obviously, despite the denial, attention will quickly turn to the bin Laden group because it has long tentacles. It has connections with all sorts of other groups. We saw at the Millennium a group of Algerians apparently involved in trying to arrange bombings in the United States, and now there is evidence being produced in court sessions that those Algerians were working for the bin Laden group. So that group certainly will come under immediate suspicion. There are very few others that could have pulled this off.
Right. I mean, just because of the enormity of it all and the sophistication required to stage these multiple attacks, this is not something some small cell can pull off. This is obviously a group or groups, well-financed and extraordinarily well-organized.
That's correct. Now, another thing you'll notice is that you remember the attack on the USS Cole in the Yemen harbor. That was the first time that kind of an attack using small boats with bombs in them had been used against an American warship. It worked once. Now the U.S. Navy has taken steps to make that much more difficult to do. Officials saying this may work once. They will now have to take measures to try to make sure that this kind of thing can't be done again. But these are apparently hijackings of civilian aircraft. So it was a sort of modus operandi that was dreamed up in some evil terrorist's mind and done on a massive scale here today, Aaron.
The Taliban spokesman from Afghanistan.
David, thank you. CNN's David Ensor, our national security correspondent, on what he is hearing, what he knows, what the reports are as we approach 11:20 Eastern Time. For those of you just joining us, and as you can see on your screen, the Taliban, the government in Afghanistan, expected to make a statement soon, and we'll monitor that for you. For those of you just joining us, let me try and put as many of these pieces together as I can as we stand here in New York. At about 8:45 Eastern Daylight Time this morning, the first of the Trade Center towers was hit by a plane. It crashed into the south side of the tower. About a half an hour later, a second plane came from the right, and you can see it coming behind the first tower, and then it hits the tower, and you'll see the flame and smoke coming out, I guess 3/4, maybe a little more, up the tower. That's where this all began. About a half an hour after that, the first of that tower that is now, you see, in flame there in your shot, collapsed. The top collapsed. And there was
has to be extraordinary. Tom, we'll throw it back to you.
Thank you very much, Pat Dawson. Those are the first numbers that we've had this morning. They think there were about 20,000 people in the two buildings at the time of the attack, to say nothing of the untold number of people on the streets or in nearby buildings who could also have suffered injuries or worse when the buildings did come down. This is tantamount to war. You're looking at the lower end of Manhattan. A plane has attacked the Pentagon this morning as well. There is a report of a hijacked plane that went down near Pittsburgh. NBC's Robert Hager is tracking all of this through the FAA for us. Robert?
Well, there's some more information now on the one confirmed hijacking that we know of, and that was that American Airlines flight number 11. It was a 767, took off from Boston Logan this morning. It was to go to Los Angeles. American Airlines confirmed it was hijacked, and we have some first numbers on how many were on board. 58 passengers and a crew of 11, so 69 people on that flight. That's presumed to be one of the planes that went into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The other planes that we know of, the other tower of the World Trade Center and the plane that went that crashed into the Pentagon area, those are unknown flights. The Pennsylvania crash, which is still not the FAA, but it's local authorities saying it. Our affiliate in Pittsburgh has heard traffic on the radio scanners saying that it was a flight that originated in Chicago and was headed to Cleveland, but I'd caution that that sort of information coming off radio scanners is very, very sketchy and so very unreliable, but it's the first report off the scanners.
Bob, an FBI spokesman is quoted as saying that there were 4 flights that were hijacked altogether. We know about American 11. I'm not going to mention the names of the carriers or the numbers on the others. Are you getting any kind of detail like that at the FAA?
No, the FAA is not getting into that kind of detail, and a moment ago I said that they said there were several planes still in the air, and that was a report was coming to me while I was on the air, so I'm getting it secondhand, and now I understand what they were saying is that they had unaccounted flights, flights that were unaccounted for, so that could mean, in addition to the American Airlines Flight 11, the other planes that went into those other buildings. It does not necessarily imply that there are still planes in the air. A little more information. Canada has now shut all of its airports down, but it will leave the airports open to allow incoming planes that were bound for the U.S. and are now prohibited from landing at U.S. airports to divert into Canada. But otherwise, Canada is allowing no takeoffs, and it's not taking inbound flights from any other place other than planes that were bound for the U.S.
Well, now we get word from American Airlines, Bob, just stay with us here for a moment, that it had 2 aircraft in this tragedy. Flight 11, a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers and 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. Flight 77, they're saying, a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to L.A. with 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. That's from Al Henkel, who's one of our guys in the Dallas area, from American Airlines.
Yes, so now we know the identity of 2 of the flights involved in today's incidents. That leaves at least 1 more, and if the report of the crash in Pittsburgh is accurate, that leaves 2 more that we don't have identified yet, but it gives us those 2 that you mentioned.
Well, it could have been both these planes could have been into the Twin Trade Towers, because it was plainly there were 2 airliners that went into the Twin Trade Towers up here, as we saw on the videotape of the crash.
Okay, they say there's a bomb in the school here. I was told by firefighters.
Pat Dawson, let's go to you in Lower Manhattan. You have a report of another bomb.
All right, Tom, we've just been told we're being evacuated. You can see all the emergency workers walking north on the West Side Highway in New York. We've been told by firefighters here that there is a report of a bomb in this building. This is a school, a high school right here. And as you can see, they're moving everybody away from this building. They've said that there's a bomb in the building. They are evacuating us north now. That is according to firefighters on the scene, and we're going to move out of here right now just to keep ourselves safe. So we're going to start walking north ourselves, but that's what we're being told by New York City firefighters here, that there were reports of a bomb in that high school right there. It's called Stuyvesant High School, and so we are walking north to get out of the way. You can see just to my left here, these are even the ambulances which were down there are being moved north. The firefighters are being moved north. Everybody is being moved north. We're being asked by the police now to go north and get out of the way. Officer, do you have any idea of what the problem is?
There's a report of a secondary device possibly in the area of this school, so they're going to move everybody back as a precaution.
Secondary device meaning a bomb?
Possibly.
Okay, and where did that report come from? Was it called in?
It came in over our radios, and it's reported through our supervisors on down, so we're pulling everybody back.
And that's in the Stuyvesant High School right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Officer McQuaid.
Pat,
that's Officer McQuaid of New York City Emergency Service.
Pat, that school has been evacuated?
Yeah, well, I don't think there was anyone in the school, Katie, this morning. At this point, I think everybody had been evacuated from here probably when the first events took place early this morning, just because of the fact that it's so close to the World Trade Center. Most of these buildings around here have been evacuated, so I would imagine, I never saw any kids going into that school this morning, so I'm going to presume that they never even allowed them to get to school this morning, and that anywhere that were here at 8:45 were probably moved out almost within moments after this the crash took place, because it literally is only about 10 blocks north of here, and I haven't seen any students coming in or out.
All right, Pat Dawson, thank you very much. The big story, obviously, that is still to be resolved is how many planes were hijacked. We now have a report that there could have been as many as 4 of them. We know that 2 planes were involved here at the Twin Trade Towers. There's a report of a plane down north of Pittsburgh. Another kind of plane went into the Pentagon, but there could still be planes in the air that are under the control of hijackers. We don't know for sure what flights they are or where they're headed. There are some unconfirmed reports of them. We can only tell you that American 11 and American 77 have been identified by American Airlines as 2 of the planes that were involved in the incidents today.
And the hijackings are scattered somewhat around a fairly wide area, and we just have to remember that 2 of these planes did arrive at the World Trade Center within 18 or 20 minutes of each other, just to, again, point out the coordination of this attack. We're going to go down to NBC's Tim Russert, who is standing by with more information. Tim?